So tonight, Tessie Walters is here, and she's going to talk about wildflowers of the foothills, exploring Colorado's range. I know I'm not staying in front of the camera, but I'm going to stay right here. Tessie will talk about many common flowers of the foothills and Front Range. She's a dedicated horticulturist. No, that's not right either.
They're both right, actually.
Horticulturist. With a passion for fostering connections between people and the natural world. With 18 years of experience managing and maintaining public and private landscapes in Colorado's Front Range, Tessie has developed expertise in sustainable garden practices. She grew up hiking in the foothills and mountains of Manitou Springs, where she first found her connection with native plants. So now she's working at the gardens on Spring Creek in Fort Collins. And we're so glad that you can join us.
Thank you.
So we'll let you take it away.
All right. I'm going to try to do this without a microphone. Please tell me if you can't hear me. Because I can talk pretty loud. I think you guys are going to be a good audience. All right. Welcome. Thanks for having me out. Is the light good?
Yeah, well, she's going to turn off the lights.
Okay. It feels comfortable there. It's not right in the face.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Let's make sure this is good. It is. All right. So this is just... So I didn't want to make it too hefty for like an hour or less talk. So we're just gonna kind of cruise through some flowers that you might be familiar with, you might not. Please feel free to take pictures of the slides. They're quick, easy references. If you're out on a hike, you could flip through the pictures of the slides. But yeah, I also put some anecdotes in there for you to maybe help you remember some of the names. I tend to make up a lot of silly things to remember stuff. So, yeah, that's me. That's actually in Rocky Mountain, doing the Alpine plant course. So I did do the Native Plant Master courses. I never did the volunteer stuff. Same with the Master Gardener. I did the Colorado Gardener program, but I never did the volunteer stuff because I work.
A little louder.
Louder? Okay, I'll just do the mic. Okay, is that good?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, you guys kind of know a little bit about me. I do like to grow veggies as well for myself, but I don't really do that as a profession. I work specifically in the Foothills Garden at Gardens on Spring Creek, so I have a lot of experience with that type of landscape, the type we all want now. That doesn't include a lawn. So hopefully these are objectives for this class or talk. And yeah, hopefully you guys can take away a little bit, maybe even just remembering a few things that you'll be excited to know when you see it on your hikes. You'll be like, oh, I remember that one. So I kind of just organized it by seasons. So there's going to be about 5 or so from each season. So the first ones will be hopefully the first flowers we're seeing soon-ish. You may be familiar probably with this sort of landscape layout of Colorado. So most of us live in the foothills region. And yeah, it's sort of intersecting the prairie, grassland, low shrubby woodlands, and then up into the montane. So I'm sure you all hike in a variety of those locations. I didn't do any alpine frilly flowers because that's a whole nother world that I'm not as familiar with. I am an enthusiast though. So here's a little bit more, just kind of giving you an idea of this climate that we're talking about. And then here are some of our keystone species for these kind of intersection between the grassland and the foothills and the montane. So these are going to be really important habitat plants that you might be familiar with. So the Quercus scambellii, or the gamble oak, the scrub oak that we see around 6,000 feet. Manitou's covered in it. I know Boulder has a lot of it. A lot of it has been removed as well. The Cercocarpus is a super familiar guy on the bottom left. That's what is all over around Horsetooth Reservoir. And Cercocarpus or mountain mahogany.
Oh, mountain mahogany.
Mountain mahogany.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, please do ask me because I tend to refer to Latin names without even thinking about it, but I'm happy to share all of the common names and anecdotes I have about anything. But and then we have our choke cherries, our rabbit brush, our artemisia. This is the woody sage brush. So this is more of like the 3-foot tall kind of guy that you might see in more of a sandy soil. And our cottonwood trees. Okay, I have to point it over there. And then this is just talking about some of our important ecological roles that the wildflowers play. So specifically with pollinators, and therefore pollinators are providing food for birds, and then the food chain continues up. So it's really fun to get to know these plants a little more because you also get to know the animals that rely on them as well. So that's our Indian paintbrush, or Castellija, which we're all probably familiar with. This is Garden of the Gods down in Colorado Springs. And then this is another slide about ecological roles, so stabilizing the soil and being adapted over generations in our climate. So we call this ecotypic, which means that these plants have thrived and adapted to all of our climate changes that have happened here, which makes them particularly, capable of living here.
What's the name of that one?
This one is the pasque-flower,
That's
or pulsatilla, and I have a slide on it, so I'll save all the anecdotes for a second.
Did you say they were ecotypic?
Ecotypic, yes. Which essentially you could adapt other plants that are from similar climates to be more ecotypic through generational seed collection, which is the fun fact. So here's a little bit of resources if you're interested in knowing more about the pollinators specifically that visit these plants. These are some info sheets you can just get online from the Xerces Society. I just copy pasted a couple so you could get an idea. But with these, they tell you the specific species of plants, and then, bloom times, all that stuff, and then what type of life it supports. So is it caterpillar food? Is it a good pollinator source, a nectar source? Is it for birds? And that's kind of fun to learn about because then you might also recognize one of your little butterfly friends or someone that's visiting the plant when you're hiking. So this is just seasonality. So basically talking about March through September, we all know that everything's not always the same every year. Things can be variable by 2 to 3 weeks from my personal experience. So, the variation, just be open to recognizing when the weather's warm, that's when you should probably get out there to try to scout your first flowers. We do have some stuff blooming already in the Rock Alpine Garden, some little crocuses and stuff. So this is going to be our first little guy. This one is Claytonia. They also call it miner's lettuce, spring beauty. Those are some easier names. I like to think about how juicy the plant is because it literally is like lettuce. When you crush it, it bruises. It's got so much water in it. And yeah, it's got some interesting history as like a source of food for indigenous people and for settlers. But I would say you definitely see this at a slightly higher elevations and in more of like a crooked riparian-esque zone. So a little bit less sunny, a little bit more, forest floor type of plant. And that's what I'll try to do with each of these two is kind of tell you where you might see it, because that helps me personally. A corm is like a corm is another term for a bulb. A bulb, like a tulip. A tulip is a corm. A daffodil is a corm. But we won't get into the depth of all that. This is a cute little violet. So I've seen this guy out early in the spring, way out east by the Piney Buttes grasslands, and also over at the foothills of Horsetooth, slightly later. So that's what's cool too about variation is if you're going up slightly in elevation, you might see the same plant twice in a year because they will have variation based on elevation. So this guy likes to grow in also a variety of soils. There's a few different varieties of this and surely adapted too, but this will grow in really dense clay, dusty soils, really sandy soils, and high saline soils. So it's really adaptable, but also not like an easy plant to grow by yourself. It likes to be naturalized. And here's our pasque flower. So there's some other fun names for it. Pasque means Easter. So it literally means Passover. So these are some of the first spring flowers you're going to see in the foothills, probably around, I'd say anywhere from 5,000 to 6,500 feet. That's a total guess, but based on where I've seen them in my life. So they are very fuzzy, like incredibly furry, and that is an adaptation to keep from freezing in the early winter. And these can actually handle snowfall on top of them, and then they'll just be right as rain as soon as the snow melts. So that's sort of an insulation, a little fur coat that goes over the top.
Are they in the crocus family?
Yeah, they're in the, well, yes, what's the crocus family? Yes, I believe so. They're in the Ranunculaceae family.
Oh,
That helps.
is there another flower referred to as prairie smoke?
Yes, that is also in the Ranunculaceae flower. It's also called Geum or Avens. It's more of a late summer. And it's going to grow, so this is going to grow in more of like a shaded sub-forest floor kind of dappled shade. But the prairie smoke is going to grow in like hot, sunny, windy, dry spots. And it does get sort of the same twirled, like furry seed head that spins up.
What I have, that's what I was.
Yeah, that's a good garden plant. So very good choice there. This is our little sand lily. So this one also is going to be more like of a grassland early plant in a real sunny exposure. So, but I mean, I've seen these pop up in the middle of a trail, so they can just kind of sit there, and they'll also multiply underground. So you might see them in clusters, so groups of more than 10 or so, hopefully.
Is that native?
This is native. Yeah, I definitely took a lot of these pictures off of websites that were verifiable, and I also, some of them are mine, so I will say, don't share this information. Because it is hard to find a lot of really good pictures of these species of native, like true native plants, unless you have a lot of them yourself, but most of my photos are of gardens or alpine plants. So, yeah, so I don't know if these anecdotes are helpful, but I won't read through all of them just because that will take too long, but there's some interesting things, and you never know what's going to stick. When I was learning a lot of plant identification, like one semester I learned over 500 plants in a semester, and I had to carry around stick samples and all this, and I made up so many weird things to remember stuff by, and it still comes out of my mouth as soon as I see the plant. So this is our low-growing clematis. So y'all probably are familiar with clematis as a garden plant, potentially. Wild clematises don't look much like the garden variety. But this one is going to be more of a stout, not really a vining variety. This is going to be more of a standalone, a fastigiate is what they call it, so upright. This is similar to the Mongolian clematis, if you've seen that in the garden section. But yeah, this is going to be more like shady, kind of cool areas. Not pure shade, but definitely like, you know, like the bottom of a cottonwood grove or something like that. Growing probably pretty close to the water as well.
How tall is the flower stem?
The flower stem is, so they kind of eject pretty far off the top leaf. So I would say anywhere from 3 to 5 inches for that top section of this flower stem. So in total, I would say you're looking for anywhere from a foot to 3 feet tall, a variety, but sometimes, a lot of times they do flop over. So you kind of have to look for, you know, the signs of those leaves or something. And the flowers can be very small, so they're really kind of hard to spot, but it's fun when you find them. They like to grow in on hillsides that are sort of sloughing off and falling, you know, right on the side of the trail, but they'll be totally hidden underneath some grass or something like that. I don't think I put it on there, but some people call it leather flower because it looks and feels sort of like leather when you touch it.
Speaking for myself and everyone else, And neuroprotective qualities, that's interesting.
Yes, definitely is not like an FDA approved thing, but you can use this as there's a form of this in Chinese medicine that is used specifically for seizure disorders for hundreds or thousands of years apparently. So yeah, it's a really potentially very medicinal plant. Also in the Ranunculaceae family, as you can see by the tufty little seed head, just like the pasque-flower. So that's a fun thing too when you start noticing the relations in between all the different flowers that are in the same families. We all know what this one is. A lovely plant. I will say there are varieties of this that grow at different elevations. But you're more likely to see the true Rocky Mountain columbine up in the alpine in a scree, rock rumble next to the trail where there's not really anything else, and it's probably going to be pretty tucked in and partially shaded. There are some of the little cute, I can't remember the variety, but they're like the smaller little red-headed columbines that hang down a lot more. They really don't even look like a columbine to the untrained eye, but they are much more dainty, and you can sometimes find those more in a foothills environment.
What does it mean, protected?
Protected by this, you're not allowed to pick it. You're not allowed.
That's true of all flowers.
It's not necessarily. There are ways you can get permits to collect seed and different things, but this is a truly protected plant. So it's like a federal offense to pick this guy. It's a big deal.
Gets him from the mountains and puts him in the shop.
Yes, it is definitely, yeah, not something you want to be caught with. I don't know. I don't know who's out there like catching you picking flowers, but please don't. You can get permitted to do seed collecting and things like that, depending on counties, rules, state rules, to who owns the land. Some federal land, you can get federal permits. And private land, you can get permission from an owner to collect seed. So there is a way to collect seed, and seed would be the ethical way to collect this plant if you were to ever find some on private land. Don't dig it up. It's not going to like that. I've never had success transplanting a columbine, like ever. They always just like fall apart. So
I have.
yeah, when they're babies, when the little seedlings come up. But otherwise, I just feel like unless you're right there but I'm always leaving them behind at someone else's yard too. So. This is a really lovely flower. I love this plant. So this is a little bit later in spring, and I just love how beautiful it is. It's really striking, and this will be kind of standalone. You might see this in a shorter tall grass prairie. This is going to be earlier than the warm season grasses are tall, so you should be able to see this when you look across a field of grasses that are still in their early season. But then later on, these kind of disappear into the grass, and you really can't even tell that they were there. But these, as you can see here, they really like crusty, sandy soils. So also they grow up by Horsetooth, and they grow out east of Honey Buttes, and then a variety of other spots you can find them. And they're also like a bulb thing, so they will spread in one area. Moving on. And we're probably all familiar with this little guy, the nodding onion. Super cute. Grows in like nice little cool damp spots, where you might find your little kinnikinnick woody plants. And I guess specifically I've seen it a lot up by red feather and in those woody, really deep wooded areas. So, and then this is like all over Manitou. It's everywhere. So it's a cutie. And I just thought that the history stuff about it was really interesting. And I liked Lady's Leek. I had never heard that before, but this one's easy one to remember because it's always nodding. And we all know what an onion looks like, right? Most of us. This is our prickly poppy. You've probably seen this driving along the roadside. These are native plants, but they have this amazing adaptability to come up in disturbed soils. So you'll often see these like in ditches. or kind of like up north, like, you know, if you're driving to Red Mountain open space, up in the later. The interesting thing about these is they kind of bloom in the spring, and then I think there must be another variety that blooms later, because I feel like you see these almost throughout the whole summer, but kind of off and on, not constant. But they're also going to be out in like a really kind of barren, salty, sandy soil where there's a lot of wind exposure. But some of them are pretty tall. I mean, they can get pretty robust, and they're definitely super spiky. So
What is the bottom picture?
that is the seed pods.
Those are the seed pods?
Yes. So yeah, once it's done, so this is its bud, which is spiky but not as spiky. And then these are the seed pods. So they're not mature yet, but once they're mature, they'll actually crack open, and then the seed will be able to blow out or fall out, shake out. Yeah. So these, and I think that if I remember correctly, there were definitely two varieties, because there's the Southwest Colorado Wildflowers website, and there's this website. And so there's two, and you can kind of see the difference. One is a lot more glaucous and less glossy, and the one we have up here is going to be this more glossy, like resilient guy that likes windy, cold, windy Wyoming type. Yep.
I'm showing my ignorance here, but is that related in any way to a prickly pear?
No. Prickly pear?
And is it a type of cacti or?
No. It is not. That is not ignorant at all. It is a very succulent plant, so you could assume that it may have some sort of succulent qualities. But no, it's just very waxy on the outside, and that's an adaptation to help it reduce water loss, and to protect it from the hot sun. So, yeah, no, cacti are a whole different world. Yeah. So I do think I put a couple little cacti in here. But. And then this is a cutie. So we've all probably seen some variety of this, maybe even in your garden. This one is fun because it's poisonous. And it's not a delphinium. So if we're all familiar with larkspur or delphinium, which is a common, classic cottage garden plant, but also larkspur is a wildflower that we have here. It's an annual. Monkshood is going to be a perennial, and yeah, you can make aconite from it if you want, which is poisonous. I actually saw it on a show recently, and I was like excited that I knew what aconite was. It's like, I'm nerdy. Yeah, it's some kind of blood poison or something. I don't know.
So
But these grow.
Delphinium is monksh?
No.
No,
No, it's not. It's not. This is a delphinium here, so I just wanted to give you kind of an image side by side to show you the difference. The monk's hood is always going to be much more hooded. I think, my brain is going through plant names, but I think like wolfsbane is another name for another variety of Acanthium, and they're all toxic, but really pretty. And they're kind of interesting because and even in the wild, I've seen these in a much darker, sort of like deeper blue color. And I think the lighter the blue, it's sort of more sun exposure. And then in the darker shaded areas, it's usually a little bit darker in the flower, and taller. So they'll be like all stretched out in the shady areas.
Which part is poisonous?
I'm not sure. I haven't figured that out, but I'm not gonna. Probably the seed, I assume. Potentially the seed or the root. That's usually where most of the poisonous qualities are, but it could be the whole plant. I mean, I would avoid eating it at all.